what I learned by studying the foreign language at
World
and
language.
abroad. World language. World language, which is the name of our department. My name is Therese. I'm the chair of World Languages and Literatures and professor in the German program. And this is my colleague Philippe.
Yes, hi. My name is Philippe, and I am a professor in the French section of World Languages and Literatures.
And we're excited to present this roundtable today. This has become a kind of tradition at Festival of Scholars and Artists. It's always a really fascinating and exciting discussion, and there's always lots of time for questions afterwards. So please feel free to ask whatever comes to mind as you're listening to our students talk about their experiences as students of a world language. So yeah. I think I'll start by asking everybody to briefly introduce themselves and provide a little bit of background. What motivated you to study languages? Are there any reasons why you chose a particular language you study? And if you studied abroad, where did you study abroad? Right? So I think, yeah, we can start right there.
Hi, my name is Kacie. I'm a biology major with a Japanese minor. I studied abroad in Osaka, and my background in Japanese started from my mother being half Japanese and forcing me to go to Japanese school as an elementary school child. And then as the years went on and my frustration with the language grew, I entered Lewis and Clark and took Nisam Sensei's class here, and she honestly inspired me to continue learning the language, and that it could actually be a lot of fun if you are actually taught well.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I'm a fourth year Asian Studies major. I'll just talk loudly. At Lewis and Clark College, and I'm minoring in Japanese. I've just always been really drawn to language learning, and so when I first got here and saw that they offered Japanese, it seemed like something that was really unique and different. And I was able to study a year in Osaka as well in the same program. And being able to really put your language skills to use there is kind of what gives learning a language meaning.
Okay.
But I want to talk without the mic. So my name is Josephine. I'm a fourth year student. I major in psychology, rhetoric and media studies with a minor in Chinese language. I guess I started learning Mandarin when I was little for a little bit, the after school programs where all the kids are writing characters in a booklet, and then I just didn't retain too much. And then in high school is when I started language classes and I started Chinese. And then I was happy with Clark offered Mandarin, so I just kind of continued with it. So that's what it is now.
Can everyone in the back hear okay, or should we? Okay, thank you.
I'll forego this then.
Okay.
My name is Beau. I use she/her pronouns. I'm an environmental studies and French studies double major, senior here at Lewis and Clark. And my background with French just started in freshman year of high school, basically. And I studied abroad in Strasbourg, France, my junior year. And this is Augst.
Would you say we still need mic or?
Mic? Okay. My theory is
Okay. Okay. Now we're working. Okay, awesome. My name is Andie Olson. I am a almost kind of half senior, half junior hybrid, graduating fall 2025. Depends on who you ask what year I am. But I am a rhetoric and media studies major, French minor, and I did not study abroad through Lewis and Clark, but last summer I did a month in Grenoble, which is in the French Alps in the southeast of France, and that was really amazing. And kind of like other people have said, really being there, actually living that daily life was what really gave learning languages meaning. I started learning French when I was 14, my last year of middle school. That was the first time that language classes were offered to me, and I had just always really wanted to learn another language, and I thought that French was really beautiful, and I'm a completionist, so now I'm still studying it. And I'm also on the side learning Macedonian self-taught with a professor from Macedonia because my girlfriend is from there and I want to be able to talk to her family. So that's another sort of level that learning languages has brought to my life now with that.
I'm Monica. I'm in International Affairs and French Studies double major. I studied abroad in Strasbourg also during my junior year, and I was raised bilingual, and like Charlotte mentioned, I've always had a passion for learning languages. So when I came to Lewis and Clark, French was kind of just an obvious choice for me.
My name is Audrey, and I'm a double major in sociology, anthropology, and French studies. And yeah, my first time encountering language learning was in like Duolingo when I was like 12 years old, and for some reason I picked French, and I've just stuck with it. So.
Oh, thanks. If this doesn't work, I'm pretty loud, so maybe like, I don't know. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Lilith. I'm an art history and German double major. I was late today, so not very German. Oops, sorry. And it has been, majoring in German has been an amazing experience. I totally recommend. I've made lifelong friends living abroad in Munich for a year, which is in the south of Germany. And in the department, it's just like a great overall community, and I love what I study. I knew a little in high school, but TBH, not that much, so it wasn't great, but I learned so much like being here at Lewis and Clark and yeah, majoring in it.
Yeah. Thanks. And so I think the next question, people can kind of feel free to take it whatever direction you wanted to, but how has learning a language or speaking another language affected your personality and or your sense of identity, whether in a cultural or linguistic sense?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that culturally, living in Germany, it was very different. Like I said, I'm not very punctual. I try, but it definitely got me better. I was worse before, which is like crazy to believe. I also just, I don't know. Honestly, public transit, really love that. I don't want to drive. Don't put me in the driver's seat. Like, no, like I'm going to take that. I think just, I don't know, the overall learning experience and linguistically, I would say, I don't know, it feels really cool to be able to speak a whole nother language, and like seeing the development within myself and within like the other people I've been around learning for these past 4 years is like really, really surreal.
Also leaning more towards the studying abroad part of learning the language. It was really cool to experience a different way of life, and it kind of broadens your horizons about different traditions or like things that are culturally acceptable or more normal in a different society. Like really, really niche topic that's probably like very first world country, but like transit or doing your laundry without a dryer. Weird experience, but just like a really small part of it. And then getting to be more independent with public transit being so much better and then more culturally acceptable to like eat on your own or go out and explore different things and really broaden your view. And then building a community in like another language in another country is just like amazing, I thought, to be able to experience at such a young age that now I have friends there that I can go and visit or see or talk to it for the rest of my life.
I'm going to kind of go about this question in a little bit of a different way. Looking specifically at Japanese, there's a lot of levels of politeness. I'll just talk loud. Of politeness and humble language and being able to raise your speaking partner, culturally, and in that sense, I think there's a lot of status among the language, and so you. And so you have to learn to navigate this sort of hierarchical structure through the language. And I think personally I've learned how to learned the vocabulary and the grammar structures that go with that, and I think it has made me able to sort of read opponents a little bit better and learn how to build those relationships stronger by learning the specific language that goes with talking to different people.
Okay. So I'm Chinese, and I was like, well, I guess I should study Mandarin. Well, not really. I want to preface that I'm adopted, so my family are white. Yes. And like when I was a baby, like they would hire Chinese nannies to speak to me in Mandarin, and then when we'd go to restaurants, like they encouraged me to speak Mandarin, but they couldn't speak Mandarin either, so it always felt really awkward and really forced. And then later on, as I got older, like I studied French for 7 years, so I never really felt like I had to learn Mandarin, because it's like, well, like that's not really for me, until I went to high school, and that became an option because my high school didn't offer French. It was Spanish, Latin, and Mandarin. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Now's the time. I'm going to start learning Mandarin. And my high school was also an opportunity for me to meet a lot more different people. I had more Asian friends, and a lot of them were bilingual. And I think being there with them, being able to talk in Mandarin after class, having East Asian Culture Club, also being like walking distance to Chinatown, we did field trips, and just being able to speak to them, I think really helped my sense of identity. Being Asian American, not necessarily Chinese, but Chinese American, and I think that was freeing. And then now in college, studying Mandarin, and also I studied abroad like a little bit, just for like a month, but I think that just like helped me like center like where I am, like how much American I am, and then also like how much Chinese culture do I share, do I practice? So yeah.
Okay, great. How's that? Good. Okay, perfect. A little bit of an extension of the question before and then this question. I said that I began studying French in high school, but that was mostly inspired by my mom, she's from Denmark, so I'm Danish American, but she also learned French in her secondary schooling, and that kind of was always a theme. Just like it's very important to have a second or a third language as part of your wheelhouse, and that was something that was really important and transformative for her in her adult life. And what brought her to the United States was her ability to speak English, and I think it was important for her to have me like kind of follow a similar route, or at least pursue that on my own in my own context. And so French was, I think, the most accessible way to do that in high school.
Is this coming across? Great. Well, it's gone out.
But
just as well go on.
Okay, good. Well, French was my most accessible way to do that in high school, and so I continued that in college, and I tested kind of above the minimum requirement at Lewis and Clark, but I wanted to continue, and actually took the class with Marie-Ève, and that was really wonderful. And I think the first day I was very intimidated about the fact that it was completely immersive, and we were already speaking French, whereas in high school it had been a very like French English mix. But that challenge, I took it on and continued it, and that I think is like a big character development of my own. The ability to just like immerse myself, and my study abroad experience was a continuation of that, where I was definitely intimidated, but I arrived and was with a host family and took classes at a language institute, and I think similar to what some other folks have mentioned, there are definitely like cultural norms that come with the language that are not part of English, whether that be using the formal tense of things, or also just things you don't learn in a grammar classroom and you need to learn at the kitchen table with someone who speaks that language as their first language. So I would say that that's part of my development as just a person and a language speaker, but also having access to millions of other people who speak this language in common. That's not just English.
I also want to give a shout out to Marie-Ève. Okay. Can everyone?
I don't think it's coming across.
Maybe. Okay. Awesome. Oh, maybe. Got that one word. And then, Well, yeah, okay, I'll just try to yell and it'll probably pick me up at the most inconvenient times and it's scary. Okay, there we go. All right, yeah, shout out to Marie-Ève because I also decided to keep going with French because of her class freshman year, so yeah. Yeah, I have had really interesting experiences, especially in taking on both French and Macedonian are such gendered languages, and I'm transgender, so it was interesting kind of first coming to terms with my identity in English and living in a very sort of individual identity-oriented culture in the United States, kind of having the vocabulary, having the time, having the conventions to conceptualize of what gender meant to me and how I wanted to express that, and then going to different languages and realizing that they're great. There wasn't exact translations for what I wanted to express, and it was also not only do I have to worry about what I think of my own gender, I have to remember, is this table a boy or a girl now? So that was, but it's also kind of freeing because it's like, you know, my girlfriend right over there, I'm going to embarrass her, she pointed out to me, she was like, you know, who says that anyone who's a woman is any more feminine than a book in Macedonia, or who's masculine is any more masculine than a hotel? So it's kind of, it's kind of like a freeing way to look at it, but it's been really interesting to kind of come into my own in multiple languages and realize that a lot of people also, like Macedonian and France, just don't care about the whole, I don't want to say identity politics because I feel like as a trans person that sounds rough, but the whole like, people are kind of just like, you are who you are, that's none of my business. And as much as I think it's important to like have, obviously I love participating in queer community, trans community, but it was also really freeing to just like feel like I was under such scrutiny a lot of the time here, and then go to another country and realize no one really cares what I'm doing, and that's kind of awesome, and I can just exist and move about my life and take a deep breath and focus on not saying the wrong thing and not saying yes when they ask me, how would you like your steak cooked at my first meal in France? So, yeah.
So like I previously mentioned, I was raised bilingual, and so I think,
I don't know, am I
No, I was just wondering, like, maybe if we turned off that mic and we just took yours off and like people passed your mic around?
I don't know, is this one working?
Yeah, yours is working.
Okay, sure. Sorry, Logan put this on, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it off or anything.
hello, okay, yeah, this works. So like I mentioned, I was raised bilingual, so speaking in a second language, learning another language, and the whole concept of language switching was always something that was part of my identity. But I think learning French, and especially going abroad, that was further reinforced, and I realized that what I was super fascinated about in learning another language was how kind of culturally aware and culturally curious you become. It's really funny, like, I'm sure there's some, well, I know the French language is in the room, but also French people are always like, oh, like Americans are so loud, like you guys have no clue how loud you speak in public. And so I think, like, knowing the language, you also pick up on like norms and kind of mindsets and practices that the native speakers have, and I think that has shaped me a lot. Like even in English, I'm like, am I being super loud right now? Yeah.
I feel like I could have so many different answers to this question, but the first thing that came to mind was just how like exciting and fun it is once you become more proficient in a language. Like opens up the door in terms of like specifically like media and books and music and films that now I can understand firsthand and like have really become a part of like my personality and the things that I'm interested in. And then the other thing that I was thinking of too was going abroad, specifically outside of like French, but I feel like with any language was just so outside of my comfort zone and really like transformed me in terms of like self-confidence and like being able to handle tricky situations. yeah, just generally speaking, it was life-changing, and I feel like it's a huge part of who I am now.
Yeah, and maybe like a follow-up question for everyone, like, do you notice any, like, do you feel any different if you're like, for those people who have lived abroad or studied abroad, like when you're really like immersed and you spent a lot of time in another language, do you feel like different parts of your personality might come out, or do you feel like you feel different at all when you're speaking and expressing yourself in another language?
I'm just remembering when I was in Strasbourg, I forgot to say that earlier, for my abroad program. My host mom, she like allowed my friends to come and stay with us, people from other abroad programs, and she noticed the like distinct difference in how I speak when I'm speaking French to how I speak when I'm in English. I'm a lot more like quiet and also like direct, maybe just because I don't have the vocabulary to be so like work around in the way that I am in English. But she commented on that. She was like, "Oh, you're just so different when you speak in English as opposed to French." And I think I find that now, and also like just in general, my humor is different. The things that I joke about, or just I feel like I have more directness when I'm speaking in French. Maybe out of necessity, but.
Yes, the humor part, that was really tough for me when I first got there. I was sitting at the dinner table and I was like, I swear I'm funny. I just like don't know how to convey to these people that like I'm funny. Like I would think of like sarcastic things I would maybe say in English, or just like snarky like dry humor that I have, and I could not make it come across. And then until the very end, or not the very end, like a couple months before I left, they finally started laughing at my jokes, and I was like, okay, I cracked the code. So I think just, I don't know, like my sense of humor.
Yeah, I also really relate to the directness out of necessity. I'm a very like wayward, wordy person. I'm sure you can probably tell already in English, but yeah, just not having the vocabulary and kind of being forced out of necessity to just use whatever words you have has been really freeing, especially in some papers and things I've written. I have a tendency in English to really overthink like every sentence I write, and then in French it's just kind of like, this is like one of two ways I know how to say this, so let's just go with this one and then move on. So it's been kind of freeing to, out of necessity, just release those kind of shackles. But now I've also noticed in English, I've started to like behave syntactically, especially in writing, the way that I do in French. Like I'll start to write something, I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense, and I'm like, you know where that would make sense, as if it was in French. But so that's been really interesting, kind of the bleeding over. But yeah, I noticed, humor, especially. Oh God, in Macedonian too, I sound like someone's like stepping on a textbook or something, just like spitting out random words, like there's no personality yet. I'm still trying to get there, but in French, I've learned how to be a little sly, a little witty, but that definitely, I think the single experience that like removed my fear of embarrassing myself in French was when I was in France this summer, and one of my friends who was A1, which is like pretty much just starting out, lost her voice and asked me to take her to the pharmacy, and she would ask me to type questions in English. I would ask them to the pharmacist in French. She would give me the answer in French. I would tell it to my friend in English, and we went like that until my friend got throat lozenges to cure having lost her voice, and I was like, I'm the voice for the voiceless in French. I actually can like get things done in this language, so that was kind of a cool moment. But yeah, definitely still struggle to get a sentence out most days. But you know, it's looking up, and I think living there, definitely getting outside of those experiences where it's explicitly like the sort of scripted kind of interactions you recreate in a classroom environment. I feel like when I was at like a restaurant or anything, I was like, okay, they said this, now I say this. But then if someone's just like I got heckled on the street for wearing a Switzerland sweatshirt, and then I was like, you know what, this is just like, nothing prepared me for this, and that was one of the moments where I was like, all right, like whatever. But yeah, it's interesting to like get out of those kind of almost scripted versus unscripted moments.
I would say kind of like earlier what I said, there are things that you cannot learn in a classroom. And that is a lot of what I've picked up in France. And I would say also the most, I've been humbled daily and embarrassed and had to kind of swallow my pride because I lacked the ability to say the right thing in the right exact moment or understand that the bus was stopping at this stop and not at that stop. And I think that like there are moments of like deep embarrassment, but also pride, particularly like during my exchange program. And I think I'm reminded when you talk about throat lozenges because I had a doctor's visit when I was in France because I had, some type of sickness, and I remained in French the whole time, and might have had some miscommunication about whether it was an infection or a virus that I was experiencing. But I left the equipment feeling very proud, and that I'd finished it all out and understood, for the most part, what was happening, and been able to advocate for myself. And I think that there were many moments of that, and also many moments where I lacked the vocabulary to express myself or be as eloquent as I am in English. And humor is also a big part of that. And I found that I still had pride in being able to understand the jokes that were happening around me, but not the timing to come in at the right time. And maybe I formed that joke much later on when I was thinking about it in silence, but it didn't always happen fluidly. So I think my personality and my ability to express myself definitely changed, and the friends I formed in France also noted that I was much slower not slower, but the way that I communicated was a lot more direct and formulated in French, and that the cadence of my voice even changed, and in English I think I can get very excited and maybe higher pitched and express my wit or my satirical side, but that was something that is still to be developed, but towards the end of my program was something I was proud to maybe have little ounces of among group settings. And so I think that is part of my language journey and still something I'm wanting to get better at. And I think in classes now I feel much more comfortable sit in a Olson classroom because of my experience studying abroad.
I think my personality has remained the same, if I speak Mandarin, if I speak English, but I do think that having a lack of vocabulary definitely, you have to work on showing your personality with, lack of words, or maybe you don't even use words, you use gestures and, body language, anything to get the meaning across, because I guess when I was studying Mandarin during my study abroad trip, I didn't know too much Mandarin at that time, and then my host family was a lot older. They were grandparents, and they were, I don't know where the parents went, but they were the grandparents of their grandchild, and their grandchild was there, and I don't think they really spoke too much to us like our host family, but when they did, they would speak to us in Mandarin, but then, if they weren't, they would speak in, the dialect there. So it was I was like, oh, they're really just speaking to us in Mandarin, and if they're not speaking to us, they revert to a different language. I'm like, but who I did speak a lot to was their kid, because maybe I just spoke at a 4-year-old level, but I communicated better with the child than the older parents, but that was okay. And then I guess traveling around with my language group or whatever, we were at a very basic level, but I think that was kind of freeing because at that time my friend didn't know how to say the word beef, and there were these steam buns, and he was like, Shishumuma? I was really mood at the person who was handing out steam buns, and the guy was like, moo? And then, yes, but we got the meaning across eventually, and then the guy ended up laughing, and we were like, oh, I guess he means a cow, but stuff like that. So, but I think when you don't know a language that well, I think that really helps your personality come across. I think that's when it really has to in those moments. Yeah.
I've been told by a handful of people that
my Japanese sounds very Japanese, and it's my belief that it's because I constantly apologize in Japanese. I apologize for entering a room, for leaving a room, for speaking, for receiving a compliment. And I'm kind of startled with the thought that, is this because I'm speaking in Japanese, or am I like this in English too? And I think it is because my personality is somewhat passive. I'm kind of taking that into Japanese, and it just happened to sort of fit with the norms. And so that's been a really kind of rewarding and kind of puzzling feeling, to be honest. But it's been working out so far. And so being in Japan, you obviously look different. I clearly do not look Japanese. I have no other ties to Japan other than learning the language because it's interesting. And so going out by yourself when you look like I do is a really, again, humbling feeling. And I think it's where I had the most growth, being able to navigate everything by myself, being able to travel and buy tickets and talk to people when there's a problem or a miscommunication. And so being able to bring that back here, I think my confidence has just kind of skyrocketed in that sense, and I've been able to really get to the point of what it is that I'm doing and what it is that I want to do. And for me, it has been a really incredible experience being able to take that to where I am now.
Sorry.
I guess like how everyone else has mentioned, or especially Charlotte, like in Japanese culture, being polite is a very integrated part of the language, and so I've definitely felt that change in my personality when I'm speaking to other people. Call it cultural, call it conscientious of not being able to speak very well, and being Japanese American definitely plays into that, where you're probably thinking they don't know, or they assume you're American in a way like you're not perfect, but also like being Asian or Japanese in that culture or that country, they also do have this like level of assumption that you do know like the cultural norms, you do speak the language a little bit, and when you break that, it's a little bit rude of you in a way, or something that I'm just conscious about. So I definitely feel like I'm a lot politer in Japanese than I am in English, which may or may not be a good thing.
So I agree with what my peer said about personality. I don't think my personality is necessarily different in German. The humor and lack of vocab, definitely, I agree with that. But I'm very much an exclamation mark person, and Germans are kind of periods. And I love and respect it, but getting used to that was definitely something for me. I was like, if you're just not giving me the same energy, even though it was to them. So that was something I was definitely getting used to and getting comfortable with that. But, you know, not having the full use of like, what do I say, and kind of becoming creative and like body movement and just testing it out. Also, in Munich, we lived in student housing, so we weren't with host families, and it's a very international like student living because it's for the university. And I met people and have friends, and the language that we had in common was German. And so it really did, like, you know, living in Germany, but also having friends where it's like really only German is the way we can talk and communicate and learn together. I found really beautiful.
Thanks.
Should I?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Okay, so another question I have now that you're all back from your abroad experiences, how have you grown as a person now that you look back? Because of your study abroad, because of your study of different languages, and in particular in this sort of, you know, newly, like especially isolationist environment in the U.S., how has your experience of studying another language changed your perspective on the world and your place in it?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Therese. Also, shout out Therese. Love you. You're great. You guys should study German. Yes, okay, yes. So actually in Germany, I was a part of some community organizing, which was really cool. Getting into that and finding it in Munich was actually not once you kind of find it, it wasn't that hard to do. And kind of incorporating like my knowledge and what I've done in the United States doing community organizing and kind of situation and community gathering and just building that in relation to like the German dynamic as well, I feel like really changed me and kind of allowed me to bring my thoughts and discussions to both places. Wait, would you mind repeating the question?
How living abroad and studying another language and speaking another language has changed your perspective on the world and where you see yourself in it?
Oh my god. Well, TBD, don't know, graduating in a month, but like I don't really know what's gonna still figuring it out. I may go home to LA, but my bestie who I studied German with, she actually was the one who was like, you should study German, and I said, when you study art history, and now we're both art history and German majors, she's headed to Austria for a Fulbright, and I've gotten in contact with some people because I love my experience in Germany, and now am having an opportunity to move to Austria as well and kind of explore that. Also just like being around, meeting people who are international from different places. I have like so many places that I haven't necessarily been to, but I know will feel like home because I have people who feel like home to me, who I've met, and kind of expanding my knowledge on the world, and I still continue to, and just kind of having this open mindset, I feel like it allowed me to bring this up.
For me, definitely like the independence and being able to like learn a language and fail a lot. It's not the only way you learn how to speak a language. Gave me a lot of confidence, I think, and like comfortability doing that. Sorry, I'm blanking so hard right now. And then also being like the feeling of being able. I'm from Hawaii, so moving here was kind of a big jump for me. And then also going to Japan for a semester, it was just like being weird, being able to pick yourself up and go to a completely different place, and then eventually finding like people around you and like a community to be with. I'm also forgetting the question. I'm so sorry.
You're perfect.
Perfect.
Great. Gosh, thank you. Mike is sabotaging me. I really like what Kacie said about making mistakes and being comfortable doing that, because to me that's how I learn the most, because I always remember the embarrassing moments over the perfectly spoken conversation, and so those really stick with me, and they're what motivate me to do better and study harder and kind of expand my vocabulary in that sense. And being like residing in Japan for a year and having lived there is so different than just traveling there and being a tourist. You really start to make these memories and these connections that you never even thought were possible. Even just spending a certain amount of time there it was really, really special. And so I went back to visit some friends there over winter break, and it was my first time going back, and it was just so weird being back and knowing that this apartment is no longer mine now. Like there's some other weird exchange student there. Like I don't want that, But it was really great to go back and realize, oh, I do have a connection here. And so after graduation, I was accepted to teach English in Japan as part of a exchange program, which I am really looking forward to navigating sort of the Japanese workforce there. Obviously it's intimidating, but I hope to sort of take the sort of mistakes make you better philosophy and use that to lift myself up and get through it and just see how it goes.
Before I start speaking, can you tell me the question one
Okay.
more time?
The question was, how have you grown as a person? Like now, looking back on your like experiences so far, and then also like how has studying a language and living abroad changed your perspective on the world and how you see yourself in it?
Okay. Well, I'll start from where I come from. So obviously I'm adopted, but I lived my whole life in New York City. And because of that, I was exposed to a lot of different places. I mean, a lot of different people. But then also I grew up traveling. And so I've always, like, known there's more than where I just come from and, like, where I am in the moment. But I do think learning language, like studying Mandarin and studying any other language as well, it really opens the door for, like, who you are with right in the moment, and like being able to even say hello to them, like all of a sudden like their shift and their openness and approachability towards you is different. So I think it really helps me communicate with more people, and you also see like a side to them that might have been more guarded if there was like a language difference, a language barrier you had to overcome. So just like being able to understand the welcomeness and inviting of everyone, the hospitality, I think that is what learning languages offer you. Yeah.
I would say that my personal growth that I received after studying abroad and studying this language is very connected to my mom's own experience coming to the United States at a similar age. And I think that having fulfilled that program and finished it off, and I felt very proud of my ability to take care of myself and be independent in a completely new space, made me feel also like she was proud. And I think that, not in a negative way, but we oftentimes compare ourselves to our parents at that stage in their life, at that point. And so I felt really good about kind of living up to my own expectations, and then also expectations she had, which come from a place of like believing that being a citizen of the world will provides an education that is just as valuable as being a college student, and coming to college was something that I kind of had to reconcile with her also, that I would gain this experience of travel and of learning from others and of observing the world, as well as learning it in books and learning it from scholars. And so I think that after my program, that kind of piece of it was kind of fulfilled, and I saw the most development in my language ability when I was in France, or when I got to college, being immersed in classrooms, and then further when I was in France. And I think that learning is not done for me, and I do plan to go back to other, either to France or a francophone setting, to kind of improve my language ability and keep learning and exchanging. And so I also am waiting back to hear from a teaching program called TAPIF, where I would be a teaching assistant in France for next school year. And so hopefully that will be my next opportunity to continue the development I had there, and also reconnect with some really great friendships that I formed.
Yeah, this might be pretty redundant to what other people have been saying, but I think for me the biggest way that studying a language, and especially studying abroad, changed the way that I interact with the world, the way that I see myself, was really just being forced to not doubt myself in tricky situations, and just realize, face up to the fact that I actually could do hard things, and that I think it's made me just a lot more spontaneous now, knowing that I've been, when I first got to France, I was off of 2 flights coming back from Macedonia. I was completely alone in Lyon, and I was like, if I don't figure out this bus schedule myself, I'm not getting to my hostel, and I'm not getting 500 kilometers south to Plateau in 2 days for my study abroad program to start. So it's just you're in these situations where you just have to trust yourself, and to an extent that I hadn't really needed to rely solely on myself before. And it was really powerful to realize that all of these things I've been just kind of sitting in my room back in Illinois thinking, oh, other people do those things, but I never could. Oh, I actually can. And it was the best 7 weeks of my life being in Europe last summer, and I hope to go back, and I may have to go back more out of necessity thanks to the fun political situation here, but I'm trying to kind of take that in stride, I may end up back in Eastern Europe, which would be really, really cool, and definitely, hopefully I would have the same sort of experience with progressing in French when I was in France with Macedonian now, in Macedonia, hopefully, because it really just living in it every day. I feel like if I went back to France now, there's like another kind of version of myself waiting for me there. I feel like I kind of left a little bit of Andie there. So yeah, and hopefully continuing to make international connections, working at the Bone here, and obviously my girlfriend is from Macedonia and I have friends from all over the world, and it's just really, really cool to learn so much from the people in my life and have conversations. I found that people are so much more willing to go beyond the surface level outside of the United States, and that's something that I had always craved, especially growing up in the Midwest, where you realize you don't really know anyone because everyone's just saying, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good, thanks, for like 20 years straight. And yeah, so actually getting to talk to people and know what they care about and know what they're about to an extent that I hadn't before just makes me want to keep seeking connections, keep going out there, and keep doing things that I never thought that I would ever do. So yeah, I'll save myself from being redundant.
I think after coming abroad, like other people have mentioned, I became much more like independent, confident, and secure in myself, especially with the everyday things that may seem kind of basic to people living in France or people in other places. I remember my first day, not only was it my first day speaking French, but it was my first day taking a bus ever. I'm from Los Angeles, so they're practically non-existent. And I didn't know that a bus went 2 ways. Yeah, that was problematic. And so I went the wrong way. And it was the same day as my placement exam, so I was like, I have to figure this out. And I also ended up in a part where our program coordinator had told us, preferably, like, don't go there alone. So I went up to the bus driver, and it was like, it's that moment where it's kind of just like fight or flight. And I was like, where do I go? How do I get here? I'm trying to go. And well, he wasn't very nice. He was French, sorry. But the French are nice. So he was just not nice. And well, I figured out how to go, and I think from there, just like making those like tiny mistakes and figuring out that like I can do it and that I will find a solution to it has really translated into being back home or back at school. That being said, I can't promise that I can take public transportation and get to the place where I'm trying to go, but and I think bigger picture, also as an international affairs major and being able to take some like politics and like history classes in France, I think I became much more aware also of how, and our classes here, I feel like at Lewis and Clark are a little bit more how international politics is related to the US, and so being able to take it in France, it was a completely different viewpoint, and more so how they look at us in other contexts, which I found really valuable also to my studies here.
I feel like when I started learning French, I had like this big grand idea that I would like come to college, I'd start taking all these classes, I'd go abroad, and I'd be like perfectly fluent, and it would be so easy and wonderful. And then, of course, I don't know, there's like so many more challenges along the way, and I like still struggle with perfection when it comes to French, and probably will because it's a long process. But I feel like the one huge takeaway that I took from going abroad and just this whole experience has been like, what do I do in the present moment with the skills I have available to me? How do I make the most out of this experience, even with the other things that I'm like failing at or like I'm struggling with? Like, how do I make this work for me, and what do I take out of it? And I feel like that has applied just like so greatly to my life, even outside of language learning. And now I feel like so proud of myself for like being able to take that positive attitude away from like the challenges that presents. And then in general, like I don't know, I'm excited to keep learning French now. Even at this point, I'm like working as a nanny, and we do like French immersion with him, which has been so exciting and fun. And I would love to do temp beef eventually. And I don't know, I'm just, yeah, it's been a great addition to my life, is what I would say. Yeah. Oh, and I also really liked what you said about taking the classes on global affairs, but from like, I mean, we were in classes with other international students and from a French professor, and I think it made me realize how like linearly I saw like global events in some ways, and so it's been so great to take that back with me. And yeah, good perspective.
Okay, maybe one more kind of question for everyone, and then we'd love to open it up for questions, like Q&A from the audience. But a question for everyone up here is, you know, in 2025, like more and more people are learning English around the globe, and also we have like Google Translate and ChatGPT and all these other kind of like technology-based translation programs. And the question for you is like, why, like, you know, kind of what are your thoughts on that, and like why is it important to, what's the difference maybe between like learning a language yourself versus letting Google Translate it?
I think it's similar to what you were saying, like the hospitality aspect, where like there's something different about like being able to speak it to somebody as opposed to like using a translation service. I think it's just there's, and like even the messiness of that, like the imperfections of having a communication difficulty. I think I remember just people were so much more receptive to me when I would try myself, even though like the grammar wasn't perfect, and I was able to form great relationships that way. And then I also think connects to, I think, what my answer was for one of the first questions was like engaging with art is so different when you're reading it in French as opposed to trying to translate it. I found so many times that there are like words or phrases that I try to translate, but now I know French in a more proficient way, it just like doesn't mean the same thing. And so it can be so fulfilling to like read things, or like music specifically is big for me, to understand it in like the authentic way.
I think two things come to mind. One, from the previous story, I think you think that in fight or flight situations, you're like, oh, I have my phone on me, like, no worries, I can use it, I can type it in English and it'll translate it. But in moments like that, that didn't occur to me, and it was just more so what I knew or what I was trying, where I was trying to go, and that's just how it comes across. So I think it's valuable in that sense. But also, like I previously mentioned, I just think culturally, even if I made a mistake when speaking it, I felt like people were so much more welcoming and accepting of truly showing me or going above and beyond what we were talking about, because they saw that I was also putting in the effort to learn their language and their culture.
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes use, like, I found some great, like, online more dictionary versus, like, translation services in terms of, like, looking up individual words or phrases to kind of bolster if I run into something I don't know in a book or something like that. But in terms of, like, actually trying to use translations like that when talking to people, I have found that it is almost always the best to just try to, you know, I think you said, like, to bring you, and not just go with the translation. Like, it's one thing to say, like, yes, this is word for word translated, but I have a very vivid memory. I was trying out, like, longer sentences for one of the first times in Macedonia, and I said to my girlfriend, I was like, be honest, would people ever speak like this? And she said, maybe if you were talking to the president. And I said, okay. So I'm scrapping that. But yeah, because you can say word for word, but I think the thing that has really opened my eyes, actually having gone to countries where the language that I'm learning is the main language being spoken, is the difference between saying and meaning. Because it's one thing to just translate what you're trying to say word for word and call that good, and it's another thing to try to rise to what the meaning truly is, especially in the cultural context, and speak to people where they're at, not where you are at, and be willing to be humbled and make mistakes, but know that even your, like, maybe if your grammar's a little bit off, it's still better than speaking as if you're like a text-to-speech email to the president. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the whole translation services. I think it can be helpful to sort of bolster existing vocabulary, but I think to rely on it is to miss the culture and the humanity behind speaking another language.
I think very similar, like from my own experience and some other things that we're observing here today is the importance of a concept I learned called circumlocution, which is basically like speaking around the word that you're trying to find, even if you don't have it. So rather than saying, here's a chair, here's this thing that I need to sit in. And I think that was something that I used a lot when I was in France, and then also in French classes or any language classes, is like getting across the meaning, not just the literal sense of the word. And at least for me, like another thing that sticks in my head is that communication is also about intention. And so even though we might not have, like, this I've experienced, but like I didn't have the exact word for the thing, but I was intending it in that way and was conveying the meaning. And another aspect of this reminds me of my friend earlier today actually was presenting at FOSA for her Hispanic Studies capstone on transnational identity and translation, pulling from scholars, a Chicana scholar at UC Santa Cruz. The book is called Borderlands. But she was basically describing the theory and the importance of translation in her own translation work, and how even though the direct sense of the sentence might not have been there, there were kind of two ways she could have translated each sentence, and she oftentimes went with what the meaning was or what the sentiment was or how it felt to her mind or to her body rather than just the direct translation. And that for like owing respect to the original text or owing respect to her original intention of the communication, she preferred to do that rather than just translate it literally. So I think that in using AI or in using like one-to-one translation services, it's not really something I've partaken in because it hasn't come to my mind, like Moni also asked, but I also think it kind of rids that sense of I'm a human and I'm communicating to another human.
Yeah, I feel like there are obviously issues with like translation apps, and like anyone who was in a class or had to translate anything for themselves, like from one language into another, obviously understands like the difficulties of it. Like when translating a book, there might be like this one word that describes something so beautifully and so shortly, but then when you try to like translate it to English, it takes 5 words to describe it, or it's something very sciencey, very technical. And like, well, this is like a creative fiction book. Like, I don't think they're putting this like long sciencey word in it. Like the tone of feeling, like definitely feels off. So there's that part, and then what else was the question?
I think the question was more about sort of what's the point of learning languages anymore.
And that is the point. That is the point, because tone and meaning matters so much in what you're trying to get across. If you rely on translating apps, like so much of culture is lost. It's like a rejection of culture. So much of learning the language is having the language wash over you, going into a place where you know nothing, and all of a sudden you're accepting this language that has existed. And especially learning Mandarin, it's such an old language, just with so much history. There's so many meanings and depictions. There's also like radicals where you kind of guess, like if you really don't know what the word is, you're like, well, there's something about like fire, and there's like a tree right here, like maybe it means this, like, especially like if you're looking, like, you know, reading signs, you're like, oh, I need to see where I'm going, stuff like that, which you lose when it's just, you have like Roman like letters and like different alphabets as well. Like there's so much involved in it and meaning, and you completely lose that, I think.
Okay, we're safe so far.
First off, I just wanted to say I love what you said about sort of talking around the meaning and that $5 word that I don't remember, but I think that is just a staple when learning languages, and it really does make you feel like you're expanding on everything that you're saying, and so it really does, it's a great sort of skill to have and to know what to do. It's very fulfilling. And secondly, I like what was said about sort of hospitality and showing respect to the other culture and the native learners of, or native speakers of that language. And I think in a country like Japan, where Japanese is spoken only in this one area, and you showing that you have come here and taken the time to learn this language that is only spoken here, I think is a really, really great way to show respect for that culture, and to really show that you are trying your best to understand and build connections with them.
I agree with what all of my peers have said on the table. I will admit I did use my fair share of Google Translate on the trip. After studying a language, I think it's a really nice tool to help you understand things that you might not have like the resources to ask somebody else in that moment. But definitely like learning a language and not just relying on Google Translate to get around kind of like makes you humble yourself in order to like kind of like submit yourself to another culture and like be open to learning a lot of different things, and also connects you to the people there and the culture that they have. I know like academics are like all of the things that we've learned, but also probably like other ways to learn different languages like Japanese, like there's anime or whatever. But you get a lot of sense of like what things that they value in their culture. Like I always associated Japanese with like stoicism, and then like relating that to your own culture. And like in America, everyone's very individualistic, which is very opposite from Japanese. And then kind of navigating what parts you like about that culture of like a sense of belonging and like doing the right thing for the good of the community is something I really enjoy from that. Versus like I do enjoy like being able to express myself and like having my own hobbies and being able to talk about that and communicate that really excitedly with other people. And then also one thing I heard, I don't speak Hawaiian at all, but I've met a couple people who do, and something about in Hawaiian is that there's so many words for the same, like we have one word in English, it's like mountain, and then you go to other languages and you have like 5 different words, 10 different words, and that really speaks to, that is really important in their language. And there's like very specific things like, instead of water, it's like fresh water and brackish water, and like obviously if we have all these different differences in the specific types, that's something really important to that culture. And I think it's really interesting to think about for Hawaiian culture, like so many words for mountain, so many words for like sea. Like nature is a very large part of their culture, obviously, but just like that, it kind of hones in and like hammers down like how important that is. And I feel like it's something that we can all take into consideration.
I love to learn, so that's a plus. I would say also immediately when this question was asked, my favorite thing ever is community, and if I have the opportunity to build my community, I will definitely do that. And learning a language is how you learn people and get to know them, and that's how you build community. So for me, that's the reason, I don't know, trying and doing it is just something I really enjoy, and I think people also really enjoy it. My experience like living in Germany and meeting so many different people, people are so down to meet new people and are willing to communicate and want to and help each other out. And that's why I think learning a language is just really beautiful and important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We have some time for Q&A from the audience, if anyone has any questions you'd like to ask. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia. I loved your discussion about everything. And I guess I'm just curious, do you have any advice for people?
Speak loud.
People that are just starting to learn a language, they might not have learned it before in their childhood or anything like that. And I'm coming from a place where English is my second language, but it's basically like a second first language for me because I learned it since I was very, very little. So I'm just curious, like, because I don't know, I always hear professors, especially language professors, being like, you should learn when you're young because you remember better, because you are just like a sponge knowing or remembering a lot of what the language is. But what if I want to pick something up in my 20s or 30s? Like, do you guys have any advice on that?
I don't know if someone wants to take this, but
yeah, it might not be forever.
It's never too late. I feel like do it, like it's so worth it, and just try it out. And I think it's just such a good mindset to be like wanting to try and to do it. I don't know if someone wants to know.
I have a few family members that are like uncles and aunties, and they started learning languages when they were high school. Like, I think my auntie did JET program in Japan, so she was there as like a college student or post-college student. I'm not exactly sure. But they really just got immersed in like people that spoke the language. So my auntie did JET program, so she went to Japan and was really interested in learning the language. So she found a community and like studied really hard and tried her best to learn the language. And now honestly, she's more fluent than I am, I will admit. She hasn't been to Japan in years, and like she could like she outbeats me by far. And then my uncle is like really weirdly full Chinese, and people will tell him like, you're the most Japanese person I've ever met, which is crazy to think. He's had like absolutely no connection, but in high school he got into the language somehow and made a bunch of like Japanese speaking friends, and then moved to Japan, married someone Japanese, and they had like, yeah, it was kind of crazy to think that he just like mannerisms, like language and everything, he just like absorbed and took it in as like a quote unquote older person for learning a language. But definitely like immersing yourself in it with other people around you, like in any way that you can if you're really interested in it. I feel like it never goes wrong. It can only help you.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too late. I started learning Japanese 4 years ago, and I feel like I have a fairly solid foundation. I'm able to communicate without thinking a lot of the time. And so I think it's almost like exercise. Like, I hate to exercise, but finding ways to do it that make it fun and engaging and interesting, I think is what makes it the most maintainable in a sense. And so whether that's, talking to people of the native language, or I like to watch like reality shows in Japanese because you hear the like really funny kind of slang and sense, I think can make it really easy to sort of build that foundation. It's not all, always going to be great and fun and straightforward, but I think just initially finding reasons to study it that keep it fun and light.
By the way, I don't think every single person needs to answer every So just if you feel like you have something to say about it, then feel free. But if you feel like everything has been said that you would like to say, then that's fine too. Just so that we can get to more questions.
Okay. Well, when learning a new language, I think it's important to like always let the language wash over you. Like, you're in a place where you're not going to know anything, and that is okay. Like, I think my biggest advice is don't go into learning a language with rigidity. I think that's going to keep you stuck in thinking like, oh, I need to learn the language this way. I need to, what is the sentence structure? What's the grammar? I'm going to do this, and then a sentence will pop out. And I think that is like one way to do it, but just being in a group, like, let the language wash over you, and what sticks, and what you do know, you'll practice it, you'll find people who you can do it with, or like even just watch videos if you don't have anyone to talk with. But yeah, I think it's really okay to just not know anything. Like, I've been in language classes where I sit in the classroom like, I literally don't know what's going on, and then the teacher calls on you and you're like, great. But you still manage to come up with something somehow, and like, that's what matters. So just letting the language wash over you, I think, is the most organic way to do it.
I don't really have anything to add besides to
Does anyone here have something to say? Okay, Andie. Thirst by the microphones today.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a super big thing to add. I just wanted to second definitely, I think, talking with people, especially as someone who my biggest inhibitor has been my own anxiety of saying the wrong thing, not saying the exact right thing in the exact right moment, just letting go of that and being willing to speak and make mistakes and learn from them, and even whether that's within classes, whether that's making friends, and I also like learning Macedonian. I've used platforms like italki where you can connect with professors from all over the world, and that's made a huge difference to not just be looking up words in a dictionary, but actually be able to talk to a professor from Macedonia, ask those cultural questions, ask like, you know, be honest, is this actually used this way in daily speaking, or how might this be implemented? Can you give me examples? Things like that. That's been super, super helpful. And yeah, I would just say as much real world application as you can, because as much as the grammar is important, like I always think people ask me why things are the way they are in English. I'm like, I don't know, I just speak. And I think it's, as much as it's really important to get things right enough to be understood and form a good foundation of the language, I also think that just speaking and existing and not getting so caught up in the perfection is so important.
Why don't we take another question?
This question is specifically for those of you that have learned Mandarin or Japanese. Can I ask specifically how you've gone about the transition between like the letters in English to like the characters in Japanese or in Mandarin?
Can we repeat the question back just to make sure everyone hears it? Yeah. Into the mic. Yeah.
I said a question.
Tell them what they asked.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. You asked the difference between like the characters and then like the romanization of English. Okay, and then how we, you know, make sense of both of them, or how we, okay. I approached it as like, don't think of it as English, that's what, this is this concept, this is it, this is a new thing. Like, try not to attach old meaning to something new being presented. Like, accept, okay, this is the symbol, and it's going to mean this. And just accept, starting from scratch, like, this is one, so it's I, and that's the shape of it. And for me, I never put English underneath the character. I only put, like, the pinyin or, like, the romanization, the sound of it. So I, like, detached what the English definition of it would be. So, yeah, and I just kind of approached it as two separate different things. Like, maybe I just had, like, maybe, like, more practice comes along where you're like, okay, this is I, but you don't think of it, it's not like a, or like this is like people, like, but you don't write people because it's just, they're different things. If you just learn Mann as Mann, and like that's what it is, or like, yeah.
That is a great question because I don't know how to answer that or how to go about that. I am still struggling with learning characters and kanji and how that all kind of fits together because they can get really, really complicated. I say focus more on reading them and knowing the meaning rather than trying to perfectly write it in the correct order and in the sort of correct way. I think really getting comfortable with seeing it and reading it, I think, is my advice.
I'll just say something really quick. For Japanese and Chinese in particular, like the kanji or the more complicated writing, it's kind of fun. It's like a hieroglyph in a way, because they're just kind of like drawings. So that's kind of fun to interpret what Charlotte said, like the meaning of it.
Other questions?
This was struck by how many of you mentioned humility as part of the language and maybe even the cultural learning process, especially when you're overseas. And given that Americans are often not seen as the most humble or acting with humility, I'm just a little curious if there were some tensions with that for you in your experience. I mean, I think we already have heard how you brought this back into like your American lives. I just wondered if you had anything more to say about how this was a common thread, and one that I found encouraging.
So the question was asking about being humbled and learning humility with learning a new language, and then bringing it back to an American culture that may not be so humble at most times, and how that was dealt with.
Well, I've been in numerous situations where I just don't know, like, if someone's speaking to me, like, maybe like in French, or maybe I'm somewhere ordering something, and they'll talk to me and be like, oh, you have to come up with something. So I'm used to being embarrassed and not knowing what I'm doing, and used to like, oh, maybe they'll make fun of me, or maybe they won't understand what I'm gonna say. So I'm ready to be humbled, like in like any occasion. And I guess maybe that's also like how I was raised, like with my dad. He's like, remember Josephine, you don't know everything, and like yes. So I always come up, like I always approach things as like a place to learn and a place to explore, and by exploring, it's not a way of like humbling yourself, but just growing as a person. Yeah.
I would say yes, that's definitely something that I experienced, particularly first arriving and having a lot of pride or confidence, and then that confidence kind of degrading, and then it's kind of like a slope like this, is what I would say with language learning, and especially arriving in a new place. And I brought that kind of back with me to the United States, more just in like, in response to being humbled, in response to being able to be wrong, also asking for clarification and being willing to ask, and learning those phrases, which are, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating yourself? And that's not a shameful thing. And the same thing, I think, in English, not assuming what other people's intentions are, and instead asking for clarification, I think is what I think from that.
Yeah, I would kind of second that. I think in general, well, I've always been an extremely kind of anxious, apologetic. Like my existence has always felt kind of humbling to me. So that's not something I'm unfamiliar with. But I think what was really interesting about experiencing that in a context where it was something that I did really have to overcome out of necessity in order to function is that's more what I've taken back into English. Like I'm used to feeling anxious and feeling like I don't know what's going on and feeling like I'm one step behind. So actually what I've gained is more of the willingness to, like you were just saying, ask for clarification, ask for help, ask for resources, and also just in general, like just not assume that I know 100% what's going on and be okay with making sure that I understand in English, in Macedonian, in French, whatever I'm communicating in. And so I think realizing in those situations where it was more of a necessity kind of opened my eyes to, you know, it doesn't have to be a necessity. You can just want clarification and want to connect deeper and want to make sure you have the best understanding of the situation. And I think I've been a much better communicator overall since going to France and since starting to learn languages in general because of that.
Although this is about learning the language and speaking it, I think there's something to be said about kind of sitting back and watching sometimes, especially in this whole aspect of humility and how I think also attaching maybe like French stereotypes stereotypes that French place on Americans. There's like the tendency where they think that we always have to be the loudest in the room, always the ones talking, and so I think it's really important to like sit back and just watch. And I think I learned a lot by going out and people watching or just being on my own and seeing how somebody would order and using a vocabulary word or a way that I wouldn't have used before.
Yeah, just quick thing, basically the same thing that you guys said, but I had a tendency at first to, when somebody told me something, just go ahead and nod my head like I understood, which led to a lot of miscommunications and humiliation in that way.
And I think I did it because I thought asking for clarification would be more embarrassing, but what I realized was the misunderstanding was even more detrimental. In like some serious situations too. So yeah, I think it's helped me learn that it's okay to clarify and ask questions.
I have one question, if no one else has any, and maybe just to kind of wrap it up. Are there?
Actually, I do.
Please, yeah. Tell me, yeah.
So all of you have studied abroad, and when you're immersed in the culture, you know, in addition to language, you pick up gesture, right? Like, what new gesture have you picked up from the respective culture?
I'm thinking of like facial expressions, or like.
So the French people do that all the
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There's just, yeah. Sassy, really sassy, and like a little like eye rolls. And, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, this isn't gestures as much, but just with speaking French made me realize that there were like entire like parts of my mouth that I wasn't using before to speak English, and like everything is much more forward in the mouth for the most part in French, and so that was just a really interesting thing to kind of feel my face and my body move and embody the words in different ways that I'd never really accessed before in English and in Macedonian as well. I'm really having to come out of my shell for that, to not only sort of embody the sounds of the Cyrillic alphabet, but also just culturally things are a lot more intense and fast and loud. And like I said, I'm a very anxious, subdued person. I've had my girlfriend, I've listened to conversations with her mom on the phone where I thought that they were arguing, and I was like, "Oh, are you okay?" And she was like, "No, we were just very vehemently agreeing about the same thing." So I have to learn to toughen up a little bit to make it in Macedonia, things like that. And I'm sure I'll be gesturing all over the place by the time I get fluent and immersed more in the Eastern European culture. But yeah, I guess that's not really gestures, but more cultural and physical ways that I've sort of learned to embody languages in new ways.
Any behavioral change is very interesting. Thank you.
I would say I don't think that I've adopted like French mannerisms into the way that I speak English, but I do find if I'm speaking French with someone who is a native French speaker, there are certain ways that I intonate or certain ways that I do use my hands that maybe is more culturally significant. I can't really point to it, but this reminds me of living with my host family. I live with the family, so I have a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old son. And these little boys were so French just in the way they were. And it was really sweet to kind of see their personalities being expressed and only really being able to be fully expressed because they were speaking this language, and that I could understand that because I spoke the language as well. And then also many similarities between American children or children I babysat and these children. And kind of just the through line of temper tantrums. That's what I would say. Yeah.
I think my mannerisms and gestures have stayed the same, but I did notice some differences, but they were mostly due to age. Just like if I was speaking to an older person, I guess maybe like look more respectful, but I also did like study abroad, like in a university, so there are people like my age, and like it all just felt so normal. Like after classes you go and you play soccer with them on the field, or like they invite you to go run around the track or something. So I didn't really feel like myself changed that much. I kind of felt the same.
Sensei, I think you know this already, obviously, because I studied in your home city, but I think Osaka is a really big and crowded, busy city, very fast moving pace, and so I felt myself subconsciously trying to make myself smaller. So when I would shop for like a jacket or something and there was like a thing hanging out the side, I wouldn't buy it because I thought, okay, well, how am I gonna like get on the train if this is like bumping into people or something. And so just even sitting down, kind of like closing in on yourself and holding your bags very close to you and trying to just stay out of everyone's way, I think is something that I picked up.
I don't know if this even matters for gesture, but Japanese has a lot of like onomatopoeia in it. And I think that's something that's really not in English, and it's kind of fun and like, what is it called? Instinctively, like, more fun. Like, they'll do like things with like your heart beating, and it's like, oh, that means I'm like getting like really shy or like nervous, and that's really fun. And then also, the first thing I thought about with gesture, which I don't know if this is just kind of like a fun fact, but go like this. You're like one palm closed, and you go like that, just like asking for something. I thought that one was really, I have no idea what the history or like meaning of that was, but someone on the trip that's from Japan taught us that, and I was like, that's really funny. And we just kept using it for the rest of the semester.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think
we're pretty much at time. So yeah, thank you so much to the panelists. Please join me in giving them a big hand. Thank you.